conditioning matrix. In this lesson, we're exploring inherited and societal influences to reclaim your truth. Now that we've talked about awareness, we can go one layer deeper. Because once you start noticing patterns, the next question becomes, where in the hell did this come from? That is where conditioning comes in. You can think of conditioning as learned behavior. Conditioning is everything you absorbed, learned, inherited, watched, adapted to, and eventually accepted as normal without necessarily choosing it consciously. Some of it came from your family, some of it came from culture, some of it came from religion, school, relationships, media, community, gender expectations, money, beliefs, ideas about success, ideas about love, ideas about what it meant to be a good person. I could keep going on and on. And some of it became so deeply internalized that you stop recognizing it as conditioning at all. It just became this is how life works. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what a good mother does. This is what success looks like. This is what relationships are supposed to look like. Sorry for the voice, it's annoying. This is what people like me to do. And that right there is the fucking problem. Because the moment conditioning becomes invisible, you start living by rules you never consciously agreed to. That is why this chapter comes directly after awareness. In the first lesson, I asked you to start noticing what repeats. Now, I want you asking, whose rule am I following? Whose belief is this? Where did I learn this? And would I choose it if nobody had ever taught me this shit? That last question can fuck with you a little bit, just saying. Because when I started looking at my own conditioning, I realized how many things I thought were my values and my personality, when in fact, they were really just inherited expectations. Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Mom. Just saying. Now, growing up, there were a lot of unspoken rules in my life. Success meant working hard. And I don't mean working hard in a healthy, grounded way. I mean work until you're fucking exhausted. Keep going, do more, push harder, prove yourself. Rest when everything is done. Which basically means never fucking rest because everything is never done. Love also had rules. Love meant sacrifice. Love meant showing up regardless of what it cost you. Love meant putting other people first. Love meant tolerating things. Love meant carrying more than your share because somehow being useful made you fucking valuable. Nobody necessarily sat me down and said, Carly, this is how you have to live. They didn't need to. That is one of the things people misunderstand about conditioning. A lot of it is never spoken. Children learn through observation. You watch what gets praised. You watch what gets punished. You watch what causes conflict. You watch what brings approval. You watch what happens when somebody breaks the rules. And then you adapt. That adaptation can eventually become identity. For years, I followed the definitions of success that I hadn't created. I did what I thought successful people were supposed to do. I followed the markers. I worked harder. I achieved more. Kept moving. Prove you're capable. And at some point, I was talking about feeling stuck despite doing all the things I was supposedly supposed to do. And someone asked me a really simple fucking question. Whose definition of success are you chasing? Well, shit, because I didn't have a fucking answer. I had never actually sat down and defined success for myself. I knew what success was supposed to look like. I knew what other people considered successful. I knew what society rewarded. I knew what I had been taught to pursue. But what did I want? Holy shit, nobody ever asked me that shit. That was a totally different question. And that is what conditioning does. It gives you answers before you ever ask the fucking questions. So part of healing is going back and asking the questions yourself. What does success mean to me? What does love mean to me? What does safety mean to me? What does family mean to me? What does a good relationship actually look like? What do I actually believe about money, work, rest, sex, parenting, spirituality, worth, responsibility? I could go on and on. And then comes the uncomfortable part. How many of my current beliefs did I consciously choose? Wait, what? Because familial conditioning is usually our first fucking layer. Your family teaches you what is normal long before you have enough life experience to question it. Maybe achievement was everything. Maybe emotions were dangerous. Maybe nobody talked about anything. Maybe everybody talked about everything, but nobody actually fucking listened. If you identify, let me know. You can comment below. Maybe conflict meant screaming. Maybe conflict meant silence. Maybe money was always scarce. Maybe money was used as control. Maybe you learned that asking for help made you weak. Guilty. Maybe you learned that women were supposed to tolerate certain things. Maybe men were never supposed to cry. Maybe children were expected to obey without question. Maybe family loyalty meant protecting the family image at all costs. Maybe love meant rescuing. Maybe love meant control. Maybe love meant keeping secrets. Maybe love meant never leaving. Those things become templates. And when you're young, you usually do not have the ability to go, I'm not sure I agree with the relational model being presented to me here. You're fucking 5. You absorb it. Then you grow up and start repeating pieces of it. And this is where awareness becomes important again, because conditioning does not automatically mean the belief is harmful. You inherit good things too. Work ethic can be useful. Loyalty can be beautiful. Family connection can be powerful. Tradition can provide belonging. Discipline can help you create things. The question is whether the belief still works in your life right now. Because something can have helped one generation survive and become stricter in another generation. Take scarcity. If your grandparents lived through extreme poverty, scarcity thinking may have helped them survive. Save everything, waste nothing, don't take unnecessary risks, always prepare for the worst. Oh my God, that sounds familiar. There is intelligence in that. But if that belief keeps you from investing in yourself, taking opportunities, asking for more money, leaving a job, starting something new, or trusting that resources can come in, now the same survival strategy may be limiting you. So the work is not to look at your ancestors and say, you fucked me up. That doesn't get us anywhere. The work is, what did they learn? Why did they learn it? How did it come through the family? And why do I want to keep it? That distinction matters. Then we move into cultural and societal conditioning, and this shit is fucking everywhere. Culture teaches you what normal looks like, what beautiful looks like, what success looks like, what respectable looks like, when you should marry, whether you should marry, whether you should have children, how many children. We could keep going and going. What your body should look like, what kind of career has status, how much money means success, at what age you should have achieved certain things, when should you own a house, how quickly you should recover from a breakup, how long healing should take, even what spirituality is supposed to look like. You can absorb thousands of these messages without consciously realizing you are doing it. And social media makes this even louder. You can spend an hour scrolling and walking away feeling behind in your entire fucking life. Someone has a better house. Someone's business is bigger. Someone looks younger. Someone lost weight. Someone got married. Someone has the perfect family photos. Someone has apparently healed every ancestral pattern before breakfast and is now drinking mushroom coffee from a beige kitchen. Just saying. And if you are not paying attention, repeated exposure becomes a measuring stick. That is conditioning. Advertising has done this. Media has always done this. Social media just made it personal and constant. Now, you carry the conditioning machine in your pocket. So, part of this lesson is becoming more conscious about what you consume. Not because media is evil or anything, because input matters. If you hear the same message 500 times, eventually it can start sounding true. That is how conditioning works. And this is where we get to internalize beliefs. External conditioning eventually becomes internal language. Nobody has to keep telling you the rule anymore. You tell yourself, I should be more successful by now. I'm lazy if I rest. I have to keep everybody happy. If I say no, I'm selfish. I need to earn love. I need to prove my value. I can't trust myself. I should stay because leaving means I failed. I need someone else to approve this decision. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too late. We can go on and on about this. But at some point, you have to ask, who in the fuck said so? Right? Seriously, who fucking said? Where did that belief come from? What evidence do I actually have that it's true? And if I stopped believing it, what would change? That is how you start separating conditioning from truth. And I want to say something here that I think is important. You are probably going to discover that some of your conditioning is tangled up in people you love. That can be difficult. You can love your family and recognize that something they taught you was harmful. You can respect your culture and question certain expectations within it. You can appreciate how someone raised you and still decide that a belief they gave you does not belong in your life anymore. Two things can be true at the same time, and you will hear that phrase quite frequently in everything I do. This work does not require turning someone into a villain, it requires clarity. And relationships are one of the places conditioning becomes really obvious. Because people often walk into relationships carrying entire invisible rule books. What should a partner do? Who should earn the money? Who should initiate sex? Who should raise the children? Who should cook? Who should fix things? Who is responsible for emotional labor? What counts as cheating? I'm sorry. What counts as loyalty? How much time should couples spend together? Some of these are making me laugh because of my own situation. Just ignore me. Oh my God. Let's see. Should married couples have separate friends? Should parents sacrifice everything for their children? Who handles conflict? Who is allowed to need space? Most arguments are not actually about the fucking dishes. When they are about the meaning attached to the dishes. One person may have learned, if you love me, you help without being asked. The other person learned, if you need something, you ask directly. Now you have two conditioned rules colliding, and both people think their version is obvious. That is how conditioning creates conflict. Not because. I can't stop laughing right now, dude. Okay. Not because either person is necessarily wrong, because both people are acting from assumptions they may never examine. So, one of the most useful things you can start doing is listening for the word should. People should, partners should, parents should, women should, men should, children should, successful people should, spiritual people should, I should. Every time you hear a should, get curious. Not because every should is bullshit, because it may reveal a rule. And rules deserve examination. Where did this come from? Does this actually align with me? Or am I afraid of what happens if I stop following it? That's a big one. That last question is important because conditioning is often maintained through belonging. Human beings learn very early that stepping outside of the group can have consequences: judgment, criticism, rejection, gossip, conflict, withdrawal, being labeled selfish or difficult, being told you've changed. Sometimes you have changed. That may be the entire fucking point. If you start questioning conditioning, people who benefit from the old version of you may notice. If you stop overgiving, someone may call you selfish. If you stop keeping the peace, someone may call you confrontational. If you stop making yourself smaller, someone may say you think you're better than everyone else. If you define success differently, people may not understand. If you stop performing a role you've played for 20 years, the entire dynamic can shift. That does not automatically mean your new choice is correct. It means the system around you is adjusting. And you need enough self awareness to decide whether the discomfort comes from misalignment or simply from doing something unfamiliar. That is where autonomy begins. Autonomy is not I do whatever the fuck I want and nobody gets to say, well, I don't know. Have you met me though? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. That's not what we're talking about here. Autonomy means you participate consciously in your own life. You know why you believe what you believe. You know why you are making the choice. You understand the influences involved, and then you decide. That is very different from automatically following a script. So, over the next 30 days, I want you to start listening for those scripts. That is basically your homework, bitch. Once again, I do not want you answering these questions once tonight and deciding you're finished. Take them into your life, put them in the workbook, print them out, write on them, come back to them, add notes when something happens. Use the notebook if you have to, because conditioning becomes visible through repetition. Start with these. What beliefs did I inherit from my family? What did my family teach me about success? What did they teach me about love? What did they teach me about money? What did they teach me about worth? What happened when somebody in my family broke the rules? What expectations from my culture or community have I internalized? What do I believe I should have accomplished at this point in my life? Where did that expectation come from? What roles do I automatically take on relationships? Who taught me that this was my role? What media am I regularly consuming? How do I feel after I consume it? Does it reinforce values that are actually mine? What beliefs do I repeat internally that sound like facts? Whose voice do those beliefs sound like? What do I fear would happen if I stopped following one of those rules? And this is a big one. If nobody else had an opinion about my fucking life, what would I choose differently? Sit with that one. You do not need to make any massive life decisions because you answered one workbook question. We are gathering information. Remember where we are in the framework. Awareness came first. Now we are starting to identify the source material. What did I absorb? What did I inherit? What belief internalized? Later, we will get deeper into cycles, patterns, beliefs, trauma, self-worth, boundaries, authenticity, and all the other things connected to this. Right now, your job is to notice the conditioning. And when we start doing live workshops around this course, this is the kind of shit I want you bringing in. I thought this was my belief and then realized my mother said it my entire fucking childhood. Guilty. I thought I wanted this career and I realized I wanted the approval attached to it. I realized every relationship I had followed the same gender role expectations. I realized I feel guilty every time I rest because nobody in my family was ever allowed to fucking sit down. That is the work. Because once a rule becomes visible, you finally get to decide whether you still want to live by it. So, the new information I want you to leave with from the conditioning matrix is this: I am allowed to question what I inherited. I am allowed to examine what I was taught. I am allowed to keep what supports me. I am allowed to release what does not. And I am allowed to define life on my own fucking terms. That is not rejecting where you came from. That is becoming conscious enough to decide where you go next. Now, before you move on, I want you to download the workbook that goes with this lesson. This is basically your homework, bitch. And yes, you will hear this in every one of my lessons. Just saying. And I do mean homework. You're not supposed to answer all the questions at once. Write something pretty in the little box and decide you're done. That is not what we're doing here. I want you working with these questions over the next 30 days. Print the workbook if you like, write by hand, keep it digitally if that works for you better. I do not care how you use it. I care what you actually use it for. Because conditioning usually does not reveal itself because you sat down for 20 minutes and tried really hard to think of an answer. It shows up while you're living your fucking life. It shows up when somebody says something and you immediately think, well, people should know that. It shows up when you're feeling guilty for resting. It shows up when you're making a decision based on what your family will think. It shows up when you catch yourself judging somebody for living differently than you were taught to live. It shows up when you suddenly realize that a belief you have repeated for 30 fucking years came directly from your mother, your father, your religion, your culture, your school, or some other environment you grew up inside. That is what I want you tracking. So download the workbook, keep it somewhere you can get to it, and come back to these questions as they happen. See you in the next lesson.